Good afternoon, good evening, wherever in the world our guests are. Welcome to another Ravio Reward Hour. Today, we're going to be talking about sales incentives and whether they actually work, how they work, and thinking about how we go from the strategy of reward incentives to actual commercial results. To that end, I'm really excited to welcome Arif to this session. Arif, welcome. If you could introduce yourself, that would be super.
Sure. First of all, thank you for inviting. I'm really excited to have this with you, Vaso. My name is Arif Ender. I'm a director of compensation for EMEA and LATAM regions at Palo Alto Networks in cybersecurity. And before that, I have almost 2 decades of experience in multiple regions, multiple industries, from automotive to FMCG, and for the last decade or so in tech. And it's been always in rewards and in compensation specifically, and kind of a little bit really jumped onto the train of sales compensation. I really like that part of the overall, the broad compensation area. It's a big field, obviously, if you want to really go deeper. And hopefully we'll have a really nice chat about it.
Yes, I'm sure it will. It is the one bit of consistent feedback I get in every speaking event that I've done. Variable pay and incentives always comes up, and I'm really excited to learn from your experience and expertise. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Vaso. I'm the Chief People Officer here at Ravio. Ravio aims to make compensation work for everyone, especially for folks like us, but also for our end users. And yeah, I'm really excited to kick off the conversation today. So one thing that is always front of mind for me is that when we think about sales incentives, we need them to actually drive the behaviors and the results that we need, versus just being like an administrative function that is somewhat expensive or poorly run. But I've always found that figuring out the best way to do that, so to incentivize the behaviors that we want, is actually very tricky, because there are lots of different models for setting targets and designing incentives that make sense for different companies at different stages as well. That will evolve over the lifetime of a company. We've got a little poll here that I will publish to the crowd, and the question that we're asking is, which sales incentives models does your company use the most, or use plenty of? So that should have popped up. If folks can input their answers, that would be super. I should also have mentioned the little poll, the little sort of, well, for me, they're on the right-hand side of my screen, where folks can ask questions or engage in the chat. So that should be on the right-hand side. Meanwhile, our results are coming in, and it looks like, wow, we're really close. So a whole bunch of stuff that people are using. So it looks like, wow, we got a tie, 16% across the board of pure commission, percentage of each sale, quarterly bonus payout, annual bonuses, and then very close, actually. Oh, wow, change. Okay. Very close. We have an accelerator commission, equity, team-based targets, shared incentives, and then lower down commission per sale. But interesting. I think a great variation.
I'm not surprised.
Yes.
I mean, if I would rank from popularity perspective, more or less, we will have the same ranking.
Yes, yes, exactly. So, well, Arif, given that there are so many like different ways to structure sales incentives, how how should we decide what the right approach is for each of our companies?
I think, I think it's gonna be quite a standard answer, but technically, I truly believe of cascading of goals and strategy. And in that sense, technically you would have a company strategy, like long-term strategy that you even share with if you're a public company, with your shareholders and all that in your annual statements, and obviously internally as well. And if you want to be in people team, you will have a people strategy derived from that. And and within the business strategy, at the end of the day, if you are in a profitable for profit company, at the end of the day, you probably going to make sales, right? I mean, and generate revenue. And in that sense, the strategy for that should be linked to what you want to accomplish as the business. And obviously, there comes this plan plays a critical role, how to attract, retain, and motivate / reward the sales teams, and sales folks. And basically they go hand in hand. And again, there are like a couple of guiding principles in that sense. The one that I mentioned, it should be aligned to your strategy. If your strategy is growth related or maybe geographical expansion, there are so many different levers, which probably we're going to talk about a little bit more, that you can use. And that's the beauty of sales compensation. There are lots of levers to pull. But other than that, I think generally what I've seen as a guiding principle is also, obviously, there should be a market competitiveness. I mean, that is probably generally more on like how do you set the pay mixes or like the on-target earnings. But one key element is the pay for persuasion and performance, basically, at the end of the day, especially the psychology and behavior of the sales forces. I mean, it sounds a bit weird, but it's very cash driven. It's very money driven. And you can't blame that. If you look at really true hunter roles that goes out, for greenfield and try to get the logos, they're in a very aggressive pay mixes, like we call it 50-50 pay mix. Technically, if they are only 100K, 50K is variable, so it's at risk. So it could be 0, or if they overachieve, it could be, I don't know, 2x, whatever your plan would be, 2x, 3x. So it should be meaningful to drive those behaviors. I think we will discuss more later on that one. And one thing that I always like to see, and that is also a little bit like even what we have in Palo Alto Networks as well, there are a couple of principles that we also set. And the major, it should be consistent, transparent, simple. I call it like white glove approach. There could be a chaos back in the kitchen, but in a Michelin star, you will never feel that. It's a white glove service. Everything is super simple, tasty, and right. I think that should be the basis of the plan in an analogy.
So completely agree that, keeping it as simple as possible and easy to understand, of course, transparent for the entire organization, not just the sales folks, super aligned on that. But who, in your experience, who in the organization typically owns the decisions on sales incentives and design? Because I've seen it in, sadly, in my remit, or in, owned by finance, or owned by a combo, owned by the sales leader. That was the worst. So who typically does it sit with, or is it a sort of cross-functional, team effort?
I think it depends on the maturity of the company. and
Hmm.
the organization. So in that sense, when I really look back in the earlier days in a growth mode, and technically if I also like really talk to my peers who is really in a startup scale up, I've been generally in the growth mode, but I was always working in public companies, except one private, but was also still huge company. Generally you will see that it sits within sales or sometimes within finance, but I think it is more because of the lack of the scale in different organizations. So I
Hmm.
mean, technically, if you look at it, until you hit maybe uh, you know 5,000 plus, you can barely have a good amount of compensation or reward folks, right? It's a handful of people generally up to that level. So in that case, how many of them would you really allocate just for sales compensation? I'm not saying, I mean, you can,
Yeah.
but again, I mean, it's a bit of an effectiveness and sometimes agility. Like, so currently, for instance, at Palo Alto, we have it we have it as a separate that kind of has two roll-ups. One goes to sales operations,
Hmm.
other one to rewards. So it sits literally in between.
Hmm.
This, I think, is a sweet spot in that sense. I mean, I cannot say one is right or one is wrong. I mean, definitely has pros and cons, but how we set it up in our organization technically rolls up to sales operations because almost all the input and metric. So, I would say daily interaction is with them way more, but from strategic perspective, it rolls up to rewards.
Hmm. Okay, understood. So even that model, like, folks might think, oh gosh, like that's actually um, not not simple. Going back to our previous point. So I guess what do you like broadly, if we want to, we want to keep things as simple as possible, but what's your view on like tiered incentives, accelerators, that sort of jazz in incentive design versus like more straightforward models, and should there be a balance between between the two?
Um, Again, I'll go with the common consultant answer. Like it depends, but I mean, technically, we call it like the levers that I mentioned. I mean, technically, you have like really just the count of your fingers. Like I will say, 8 to 10 levers you can pull, and that exactly goes back to what you want to achieve in terms of sales strategy. So like where you should like tiered or like pure commission percent of each sale of product, again, it really depends on how you set up your product, uh,
Hmm.
or basically go to market strategy. Basically, again, if you are looking at renewals, that is a totally different thing. If that's the main revenue stream, which is a tricky
Hmm.
one. But if you think about the SaaS companies, technically renewals are one of the key metrics, versus, for instance, Palo Alto is in a B2B and an enterprise sales, so the sales cycles are longer.
Yes.
In that sense, having an annual bonus payout, I'm just making up, like, you just mentioned about tiered incentives or accelerators. That's one thing. Another level is basically you know the payout periods, as we call it. I mean, if the people are in a very high leverage pay mix, like 50-50, for instance, and the sales cycle is too long, and that is generally common in enterprise sales, you cannot pay people annually. Like, there's no way. It is, from cash flow perspective, none of the employees will be really happy and motivated.
Yeah.
The same thing of tier, like for instance, accelerators. Again, accelerators are really cool if you really want to overachieve the targets. That, and again, obviously it has to be smart. If you already put it really hard, and then tell the people that I have an accelerators, if you go above your quota, if it doesn't work, nobody is gonna like really you are not going to drive the behaviors. Nobody's going to try to catch up with that quota.
Yeah.
So it is a super balancing act in that sense.
Yes.
That's the complex part. How do you make such a complex disconnections of what is the payments should be? I mean, should I have thresholds? Should I have accelerators? It's super hard. But one thing, if we really focus on accelerators or thresholds, if you really significantly grow the business and coming up from basically you are in a new territory or in a new market segment for your new products, I will generally remove the thresholds and make accelerators as aggressive as possible.
Yeah.
People really gets motivated to go and hunt.
Mm.
Every dollar counts.
Yes, for sure. So it sounds like you, well, when your sort of commercial nous kicks in, and you think it makes business sense to do so, that you're happy to differentiate based on need to the business, perhaps location, complexity. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, again, at the end of the day, it goes back to your go-to-market strategy. So I don't think you will try to generate revenue or basically do sales in Western Europe versus emerging markets.
Mm-hmm.
It is totally different. I mean, the guiding principles, the guidelines should be consistent in an international or global scale. But at the end of the day, your sales strategy, and that there goes, if you really want to go deep, technically your sales operation folks have that strategy set. How do they segment the market? How do they probably do like a market insights, and based on that, they will tell, okay, we should focus, I'm just making up, mid-size SMBs in here, mid-size here, lots. I mean, again, it is totally unique to each company, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
And your sales compensation plans should directly reflect that.
Yes.
I mean, if you do a segmentation for SMB in Western Europe, where you think that you're gonna have shorter life cycle, then maybe you can go with a broader performance payout periods, or maybe the leverage will be a little bit less aggressive than, I don't know, somewhere else, or in another role that has a longer cycle.
Mm-hmm.
And that could be due to the customer behavior, or again, cost logo acquisition complexity, maybe the landscape of the overall market. There are many regulations and taxation and all that stuff. They all really impact.
Yeah, they all sort of change the game. Yeah. Okay, thanks for that. Let's sort of deep dive a little bit more into the pain that comes with scaling an organization, the pain and joy that comes with scaling an organization. So at Palo Alto Networks, you've experienced massive global expansion over the last decade or so. And I think charting that growth has been from a startup to a company generating over $7 billion in revenue across several regions. Now that kind of growth brings a lot of excitement, but also a lot of challenges, and specifically around, I imagine, designing and then redesigning sales incentives in order to keep up with the pace, the location, etc. I'm excited to talk more about it. I think we have another poll just to get a sense check of the group. So the question we're asking is, what is your biggest scaling challenge with sales incentives? And that hopefully will have popped up.
I'm also answering those way this way.
Good. We want full engagement with the polls. They're my favorite bit. Oh my God, I'm struggling not to click one. Okay.
Mhm.
Okay, I think we have a winner of planning. Oh, no, it's changed. Okay. It's a fast moving poll. Wow, very, very close. So it seems like planning affect global markets comes out on top, followed closely by cost versus ROI as the team grows, and then followed closely by the administrative burden of managing multiple plan types. A bad part of my roadmap every year, and the complexity with sales roles becoming more specialized in fourth place. Arif, would you have said that that's how the poll would have come into?
Yeah. Actually, yeah, I will say so. I mean, probably I was expecting redesigning plans to be higher, to be honest, but the first one, I know, I mean, it's a big pain, the plan effectiveness across multiple global markets, but I think it is more of a sales operations, like sales planning or go-to-market strategy issue rather than a plan design issue, I will say.
Yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day, if your market mapping is really solid, and then the plan effectiveness shouldn't be impacted how you design the sales plan that much. That's yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I think that like excluding that cost versus ROI, let's say that definitely is a plan design challenge. In that case, my main comment on that, again, Salesforce is, especially in the last 4 or 5 years, it became super expensive. I mean, obviously it's a market, it's a market dynamic issue. It's a supply and demand, and obviously every company is trying to generate revenue, so they need Salesforce, and when they need Salesforce, everybody, it becomes a hot job no matter what. And as they get expensive, yeah, obviously every company wants to get a return on investment. I'm paying these folks this much. I mean, where's it becomes a huge cost of sales line item in a P&L. And I believe, I mean, maybe it's not a super nice thing, but like at the end of the day, it's almost like a survival of fittest. At the end of the day, you need to run your programs or especially your sales plans in a quite an aggressive pay for performance model. So generally, I like those payout curves way much steeper. And then obviously, in that sense, sales compensation is pretty quantitative, right? I mean, basically, it's not about like maybe 1 or 2 performance ratings you get in a year, but generally there are lots of qualitative aspects of it. But when it comes to sales, I mean, it's black and white. The numbers talk.
Yes.
But next to that, I mean, obviously those numbers will talk. But next to that, I mean, I will definitely focus on a very strong performance management.
Of course.
If somebody's not performing, it's not. I mean,
is there a way that I mean, it's pretty hard to ensure that sales well, in my opinion, it's pretty hard to ensure that sales incentive plans remain effective as a company scales. Where have you sort of seen inflection points, or what are the signals that we need to like review and adapt? Obviously, once they stop working and the numbers aren't there, that's a signal.
Yeah.
But hopefully, you don't have to wait till that point.
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. I think it is, especially for those early stages. I mean, I'll call it again product market fit, but in its case, startup world, it is almost like the beginning of it.
Mm-hmm.
But once you see the return of your efforts, and you can easily track that. We are talking about that ROI,
Yes.
and you will see the impact right away as you kind of like track that, how much you are spending for your sales force, and I mean how much revenue you are generating. It is tough for really longer life cycles.
Mm-hmm.
Again, in that sense, enterprise sales is challenging, because we are talking about like 18 months, 12 to 18 months, which is really good sometimes. So it is really hard to get those signals, but in a very fast-paced, short cycle in consumer tech, I mean, you can definitely see if it's working or not.
Mm-hmm.
And in that case, again, I'm always asking the first question. If somebody comes and the sales comp is not working, I always go back and like, did you set the quotas and targets right? Because my experience so far, generally, a lot of companies they think they are good, but they're not good in quota and target setting.
And it's really hard to get right, like especially for a company that's at the start of its journey. We kind of don't know what the sales quota should be. Kind of like a feeling. It's a little bit top down, bottom up, and a feeling. What do you think, out of interest, like for startups that are at the start of their journey? What do you think about adding like a discretionary element? So here's a quota. We kind of feel it might be right. But what is is it effective to have a discretionary element that sort of is
Um,
based on uh, what we think?
I would rather keep the consistency, and I mean, if it doesn't work, like if you already see like two core, and again, I'm talking about a super short cycle,
Yeah.
um, sales cycle. Like if you are already seeing the in general overall quota attainment, I mean, let's keep it simple. Like your quota attainment should already tell you a couple of things. Either your whole sales force is really not a good talent, let's say, which
Yeah.
I don't think so. At the end of the day, you have to probably you want to hire the best, and I mean that would be super extreme. I mean,
Yes.
everyone can be really, like really not performing well. But then the second one, I will really just do a deep dive is, okay, are the targets or quotas right?
Mm-hmm.
Ideally, in an effective sales plan design, you would like to see a 50-50 split. Like I mean, again, it could be plus minus 10 for each, but 50% should be able to achieve and overachieve quota, and 50% cannot. That is the sweet spot.
Yeah.
And if you consistently see, like, I don't know, 70% of your workforce is not hitting the quota,
Yeah. It's a problem. Yeah.
obviously there are external factors. I don't know, like, I mean, that if there could be a war, there could be, I don't know, like really a natural disaster.
Yeah.
We are obviously excluding those. I mean, that in that case anyway, a solid sales compensation policy should also, by the way, reflect that. So that this is another topic, obviously.
Mhm.
your sales compensation policy should be as detailed and as clear as possible.
Okay, agreed. Now, it's also common that as as companies scale, the business model pivots, and sometimes several times. So companies may become multi-product,
Mm.
or find deferring ways to monetize those several products now. How do you how do you ensure that the sales incentives maintain effectiveness? And is there a world where there's different sales incentives for each product depending on each location and maturity? So there you've got sort of a library of sales incentives to lean on.
Um, I would say yes, but again, simplicity is the key. I mean, do not inflate your plans or your personas. I call it
Mhm.
persona. Like for instance, I mean, there should be a true hunter. I mean, if somebody's working on renewables, that's kind of more like a gatherer, as you call it.
Mhm.
Uh, there are different sales personas, and you don't have to really just populate multiple personas. But if you are, let's say, in your question, like if you have a new product and you want to enter a new market, the one key thing that ensure effectiveness, just reduce friction. And
Yes.
when we say friction, basically those sales teams and those personas should have a meaningful differentiation than your initial or core market, core product. So it doesn't overlap that much.
Mhm.
That creates quite a chaos within the sales force. And then you'll hear a lot of complaints.
Yeah, yeah. Chaos leads to noise, which leads to distraction.
Exactly.
Yeah, we don't want any of
No.
that.
And again, like technically, no matter what, how many products you have, obviously that there's a generic sales motion. Like uh,
Mhm.
there are different consultancy firms, different books mention it, like land adopt, or again like hunting, gathering. There, I mean, basically what we are talking about, like direct sales, indirect sales, inside sales. Within that, who's getting the new logo acquisition, who's working on renewals, and in some cases there are like specialist sales or overlay sales that touches on different products. Uh, Basically, those personas you need to set it pretty within their own framework.
Yes. Understood. And is there any, what have you seen in regards to, how to prevent, sandbagging or quota gaming behaviors, which, come up everywhere, I'm sure, but are perhaps more pronounced when teams become much larger and more distributed?
Um, Generally, I like to have the sales leadership to be involved in that.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, it's technically it's an undesired behavior. Like
Yes.
it's not. Again, we are saying always plan drives the behavior, but there is also kind of an overall culture aspect of it. So personally, I would always involve sales leadership when we see that kind of quota gaming and sandbagging. And it goes back again, if people can game the quotas, then there's something wrong in the plan
Yes.
design. And generally what I've seen is either, I mean, I call it at a high level pay for performance. But if we kind of maybe go one level down, we are talking about the weighting of the measures. Either measures are wrong, like when I say wrong, maybe not accurate, let's say.
Yeah, we could
Yeah.
have done better. Yeah.
Or their weighting. Generally, it's the weighting. It's
Yes.
the first one that I would look on. It's a quick check. Is the weighting, because um, ideally I would like to see minimum, which I still don't want to go that much. But like, if you have any metric that has less than 20%, I don't think that's gonna work.
Mm.
because let's be super honest, like if you have three measures and 40 40, or let's say 45 45 10,
Yeah.
and you see you are almost end of the quarter or end of the half, whatever the performance period is, which one would you drop? That 10% gets dropped right away.
Yeah.
And if you rely on driving a behavior on that 10%, like good luck with that. Like nobody's gonna focus on that. So and that is how you can actually prevent those gamings and sandbaggings.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I go back to my comment of your policy should be super detailed and precise, and actually mention kind of you can prevent with the guidelines in your sales compensation policy in those.
Mm-hmm.
But ideally, I would always make sales leadership accountable for that.
Yes, yes, great. And hopefully there's a good allyship there as well. Okay, in terms of like moving on to our next sort of chapter, which is maintaining fairness across the company.
Mhm.
Obviously, one of the most difficult elements of introducing variable comp to some roles, but not others, is to maintain that internal fairness across the entire organizations. So you may have, account executives seemingly earning, really significant commission next to others who, may very well feel they're doing a role of equal value, but are on a fixed salary only. We've got another poll here, which will go to the group. And the question is, how does the organization handle compensation fairness between OTE and non-OTE roles? And the options are separate comp frameworks, total cash compensation plans that include variable pay. We compare roles on base salary only, or this is a challenge we haven't solved yet. Yeah. So it looks like total cash comp that includes variable pay is coming out on top. Was that what you were expecting, Arif?
I was expecting the second.
I wonder if it also, obviously the makeup of the audience here will matter. So if the organization has, how big is the compensation team in the organization, and
Yeah, of course. Again, I mean, how complex. I mean, how complex your programs and design would also kind of reflect to that answer. But ideally, I won't. I mean, I won't put them in the same bucket, because the dynamics and the earning potentials are totally different.
Mhm.
In that case, again, just going back to the overall compensation framework, like technically you should start with a job architecture, a job library, whatever you call it, and then your leveling framework, and based on that you will have the jobs determined, and then you price them. Like, it's a super basic high level, how you should kind of come up with the comp ranges, right? In that case, I mean, you cannot mix sales with when I say so, I mean basically sales comp eligible roles with others.
It's not like for like.
Yeah.
But so how would you recommend we maintain fairness between
Going
commission?
back to your question, if I will see an account executive is one of them is in a commission eligible, like is one of them is commission eligible and the other is not, this is a big red flag. Because like, I mean, that shouldn't happen. At the end of the day, I think there should be also some guiding principles you should set, which actually is a good guardrail, first of all, because it's a common behavior. Like if everybody sees the earning potential, they want to move to those roles. Like, I mean, that's my experience. And if they see, oh, okay, the sales roles are on OTE, they are maybe, I'm generalizing, it's more or less true, like 15-20% higher. Yeah, I mean, my roles are like, a manager comes and say, okay, my roles are also sales roles. You have to have a guiding principle. Okay, what makes a role within my company a commission eligible role? And there it goes, and you can check against that, and then you can see. I mean, if there are two account executives doing the same thing, one is eligible, one is not. That's a big flag. I mean, either one of them is definitely mapped wrong. And then I think in sales compensation, like I said, it's a black and white. Like it's almost all of it is more or less is driven in a quantitative way, like, and tracked and measured, like set, tracked, measured in a quantitative way. And in that case, I think from a pay equity perspective, an apple-to-apple comparison doing the same equal value of job, I'm referring back to the you pay transparency lingo. Technically, it's you can justify any pay gap or pay equity issues. Technically, if people are mapped to the same role in the same location at the same level, again, obviously. Based on the ranges, I mean, it could be a broader range, then it might be a little bit trickier, but still, more or less, you would have a basket of people and their compensation like grouped together, and their actual earnings would be reflective of their sales performance. So I generally never see any high risk. An issue in Salesforce who's commission eligible from pay equity perspective. We are already preparing for EU pay transparency. We already made like 2 regression models, for instance, for our workforce in Europe, and like really few of them. I mean, most of them are like really that there are other issues or historical stuff coming up. Within the Salesforce, we are kind of like really fine from an actual pay gap.
Yes, I understand. And so going back to your point about being really clear with the organization, well, basically about the comp philosophy. So which roles are eligible for the sales incentives plan?
Yeah.
I mean, how transparent are you with the variable pay across the company? So do folks know, okay, all of these roles that fulfill what we mentioned on the comp philosophy have the variable element? How much is it? Why do they have it? Which ones don't have it? What's the degree of detail you sort of recommend?
Within the sales organization, it's pretty transparent.
Okay.
Which I think, and they are the ones that they should know. And in that sense, I think I like the transparency anyway, like as a personal value. Yeah, I mean, in that sense, I think it should be transparent anyway, because first of all, people should know what and how they can earn, like even for their own individual plans. You cannot hide it. You cannot hide the whole policy, because at the end of the day, people should know what is the rule of engagement, like how should they even coordinate and collaborate with their peers. So again, it goes back to the reduced friction thing.
Yes.
Basically, all these policies, plan details, and everything should be accessible by each Salesforce. I mean, in that sense, I think you can't get away with it. You can't hide this.
No, for sure. And I think it's also important for folks to be able to see, within the sales organization, what, whether they do a lateral move to another sort of subsection or upwards, what does that look like? What could the future look like for me? if I want to say within the commercial function and within sales.
Sure. Are you talking about, like, for instance, somebody comes from non-sales role to sales, or
No, well,
even within sales?
I meant, so someone within sales, for example, could presumably, if the incentive plan was for the commercial organization as a whole, so including, for example, account managers who are, let's say, responsible for the upsell or renewal, or whatever it might be.
Yep.
It might be that one salesperson has decided, hey, I'd actually quite like to try that avenue, but how would my comp be affected? What would that look like? And what might that look like if I stay in that role for 20 years? How does progression look like in there? So I think that's important.
I think it's a general comp philosophy.
Yeah.
And in that sense, you don't have to detail it within the sales compensation plan or design or so. I think it's a general, like, how do you manage the transparency for your compensation programs? Again, I'm very pro transparency, and I think if you want to do a career shift like this, if you are interested as an employee in a new role, obviously you should know what to expect. Like, I'm just making up, like, I'm moving from compensation to become a renewables manager.
Yeah.
Obviously, I want to know, like, what is my pay mix? What is the plan design? Like, how is the earning potential? What is the all that stuff? You need to know that. And currently, we do that. Like, if you go through an internal mobility, like, basically you apply, and based on that, we even give you, like, what your new compensation will look like if you are successful in this new role. In this interview process and land on this new role, this is what you're gonna earn. So and then they get exposed, and most of the stuff, by the way, obviously internal lighting is a little bit easier. They can always reach out to hiring managers and talk about the specific plan designs.
Yeah.
But we are always telling them, okay, look, your base, for instance, somebody moves from a bonus plan, like an annual company bonus plan, which is generally, let's say, 15% of your base salary, compared to a 50-50, it's almost 100% of your base salary is also a variable pay. We tell them, okay, your base is going to go down.
Yes.
Overall target comp is going to go up, and technically you have very much higher earning potential.
Yeah. And, are you comfortable with that? Yeah.
People, that's my personal mantra. And I've seen that work in my previous companies as well. Let people make informed decisions. And in that sense, your only accountability as an organization, give the accurate and adequate information to let them make those decisions. So if you hide it and somebody comes and tells, oh, you didn't tell me that my base drops by 30%, well, it's too late. If you hear that comment, that it's too late.
Yeah, you've missed the boat for sure. We've got a couple of questions, and if anybody has any other questions, do put them in the chat. Now's your chance. So Victor has asked, are there any considerations for incentives in cases where products have a considerably long sales cycle of like north of a year?
Yeah, I will definitely again look at the mechanics and the pay curve. Again, I will do it. It's going to be probably too technical, but I won't be that much steep in the below target part. Coming to the target, I will take it easy, because again, and especially if you still insist that you're going to have a shorter payout periods, then you're going to pay people either conservatively, which is fine probably, but if it will be the opposite, then you would really have some fluctuation in the employee's cash flow.
Yes.
Above quota, again, because it's a longer cycle and there's longer effort, just to really incentivize proper amount of effort, I will have strong accelerators.
Mm-hmm.
The first thing that really touches on that longer or shorter sales cycle, or basically duration of the sales cycle, is the payout and performance periods. The basically, are you paying quarterly, monthly, annual, biannual? That's a tricky one. I mean, I would keep it frequent for longer cycles, frequent payouts.
Sure, yeah.
You cannot wait 18. You cannot let them wait. I don't know, like 18 months. It's an extreme, but
Yeah.
nobody's gonna buy that. I mean, it's impossible.
Yeah. I remember I once coached someone who was in the business of selling airplanes. Not sure like what the model was. And I remember he was sort of considering doing a career change, and he said to me, you know, I just need another 10 years. If I had another 10 years, I'd be able to sell that plane. I thought to myself, whoa, like, you know, sales cycle of decades.
Yeah, and unfortunately, cost of doing sales is high, because I mean, at the end of the day, you can't take that person, or I mean, again, if you want, you can accept the fact that you can lose these people, but ideally you don't want to lose it. Like you have this
Yeah.
person, this account executive managing that account, build the relationships, and it takes long, you know. I mean, you don't have anybody, like, it's not I mean, it's not a consumer product. You don't buy
Yes,
every single day or every single month. I mean, it's
exactly.
the
It's not
same
a
thing
5 minute deal.
for us, cybersecurity. I mean, ideally, you are you're gonna have access, and almost like, you know, to the most secret. You're protecting the secrets and confidentiality of the companies, and it's an insane investment. The risks are over there, which is a good selling point for cybersecurity industry. But to build the trust that people will trust you for your products, for I mean, against the bad actors and everything. I mean, it takes time.
It's a long time. Yeah, absolutely.
And again, it's not just one airport that you can sell a couple of bucks. We are talking about million. And also, like, there is this government public sector, you know, like, at the end, they are not as agile as
Yeah.
private sector. Like, there are all these factors you're gonna take into account, and in that case, the effort level, the selling motion, is totally different, and that's what you pay as a, let's say, a premium.
Hmm. We also, thanks for that. It's a really interesting sort of part, I think, of sales incentives planning. Edward has asked, how do you balance fixed versus variable pay? Um, I don't know, Edward. You might want to like maybe give more detail, because I think it. Well, I'm not sure. Maybe it was a question in that particular context, but I don't know, Arif. Are there any like high level principles that you sort of?
Um, I so there are two things. I think if I get it right, basically, how do we probably kind of do the, you know, set the pay mix? Yes. Is there an ideal?
Thank you.
Yeah. First of all, obviously, the market competitiveness. At the end of the day, if everybody is paying a direct sales, and like a new logo acquisition, like basically the hunter roles, if everybody is paying, you know, I mean, the pay mix is 50-50 in the market, you don't want to kind of like really deviate that much from that. You know, you can't get more. I mean, really aggressive, I think it's not a good example. Let's say renewals, or let's say inside sales, you know, or even maybe if you want to put them on a plan like telemarketing, and so on. I mean, ideally, the effort for these folks are way less doing a sales, so you would expect them to be around 80-20 kind of a pay mix. And if that's the market, you can't go and say, oh, I'm going to make it aggressive.
Yeah.
Like, you can't attract people. At the end of the day, guaranteed cash is always really more desirable for anyone. I think one is market. The second one is going back to the whole sales compensation mantra, let's say, and how do you differentiate those personas, which is what is the influence in the selling motion for that role. So a new logo acquisition, a greenfield hunter, who goes to a new territory, creates the portfolio from scratch, and then basically closes the deals. I will put them in the most aggressive and high paid ones. But where you have really less selling motion, I mean, let's say renewables, and especially thinking about, for instance, Facebook, technically the platform sells itself. So your account management, or in a very general term, like the inside sales, the effort they are trying to generate a revenue. I'm not saying they're doing nothing.
Yeah, of course.
Ideally, the effort that goes there, the impact on generating $1 is way less than the hunters.
Sure.
In that case, you don't want to make them as aggressive as those.
Yeah.
So it basically, the second one is the persona and the influence to the selling motion.
Yeah. Okay, super. And then we also have a final question from Ahmed. What is the right incentive scheme for the different layers of the organization to ensure we don't lose focus on tactical versus strategic priorities? So I guess between sort of leadership incentives versus sort of the executioners, the doers.
Yeah. Again, I think it was my first comment, right? Like it's a cascade of the strategy. At the end of the day, your chief revenue officer is going to have the overall sales numbers as a target, and then basically probably you cascade down. I mean, it depends on the organization. Like let's take a simple one. Like if you have a chief revenue officer, then probably you would have the regional VPs, and then you will have maybe the country or sub-region, depending on the market maturity, and then you will have the account executives and blah blah. So in that case, it should cascade based on the territory or the market segmentation. So you don't lose focus on operation. I mean, that's operational and tactical. Strategic priorities, do not be afraid of using, as we call it, the KSOs. It doesn't have to be quantitative or just purely sales numbers, because I would like to see in any sales plan design for leadership roles to have those KSOs, a little bit of qualitative targets. It could be even like a culture, culture setting goals, again, like in an HR goal or a development goal as well. So, but it goes back to your strategy in a way. Those KSOs are really generally very useful to not lose focus on strategic priorities.
And Ahmed also asked whether another dimension could also be a frequency, like a cadence of payment.
Yeah, I mean, again, of course, sales leadership, technically, it depends obviously on the maturity or the scale of the company. I mean, even our CEO still goes to customer calls, for instance. Although it's been 16,000 headcount, probably sometimes it's also like the character or like their working environment. But ideally, the sales leadership, I don't mind putting them in a little bit less aggressive pay mix, or in a maybe in a longer frequency. But I've seen multiple. Again, it really depends how you want to generate the revenue, and you obviously don't want to kind of stretch them too much, because you don't want to disrupt the leadership that much, especially if you are already have a plan and growing.
Sure. I think that's all we have time for today. T, I've seen your question. If you, Tanvi, thank you. um, Thank you for the question. Arif, would it be okay if we answered it async afterwards? Sorry about that, but it's been really interesting. Thank you so much, Arif. Thank you for the questions. Tanvi, we will get to yours as well. Thank you for sharing your expertise, and folks, see you on the next one.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good one.
Bye.